I stepped into the Ridgeview Lodge ballroom in Aspen, just a little before the ceremony was supposed to start, trying to steady my breath as the cold mountain air lifted the hem of my dress. The place looked like something out of a winter wedding magazine. Soft gold lights, cascading flowers, a live quartet warming up in the corner. People mingled in polished shoes and designer dresses. I could already feel the familiar pinch of being the odd one out. And I had only taken 3 steps inside. For anyone listening, what are you doing right now while this story plays? I remember exactly what I was doing at this moment. I was standing there in a borrowed navy dress that fit tighter than I liked, trying not to tug at the sleeves and pretending the knot in my stomach was just nerves, not humiliation waiting to happen. That tiny moment, right before everything broke open, is something I still replay sometimes. A young staff girl spotted me and waved me over. She had that hurried look of someone trying to stay calm while juggling too many instructions. "You must be Ellie Richards." Her voice was polite but shaky. "If you can follow me, we'll get you settled." Settled. I remember thinking it was an odd word for a wedding seat, but I didn't argue. I followed her past the carved wooden arch, past clusters of guests who didn't look in my direction. My shoes squeaked against the polished floor as we moved farther and farther, away from the chairs set up for the ceremony. The girl pushed open a swinging metal door, and suddenly, the elegant music faded behind us, swallowed by the clatter of dishes and the sharp scent of onions being chopped. I froze. This was the kitchen. Stainless steel counters, stacked dishes, a trash bin in the corner, and a metal chair sitting right beside a cart of leftover rolls. I glanced at her, waiting for the correction. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Wrong person, wrong direction, wrong everything." She didn't say any of that. Instead, she pulled out her phone with hands that trembled and showed me a screen. I recognized the name immediately. My sister, Victoria, the bride. There was a message from her that read, "Put her in the kitchen. She looks like a pig and will ruin my photos. Give her leftovers." Below it was another from my mom. "It's better this way. Don't let her wander." I stared at the words for several seconds, as if looking would somehow make them rearrange into something less cruel, something less familiar, something that didn't sting all the way down into the places I never talk about. The girl whispered, "I'm really sorry. I have to follow instructions." I didn't trust my voice, so I just gave a small nod and sat down in the metal chair. The edge dug into my thighs. A chef brushed past me, not even glancing in my direction. The air was warm and thick and smelled like garlic and burnt butter. I kept my hands in my lap so no one would see them shake. Then I heard it, faint at first, then unmistakable. My sister's voice drifted in from the hall through the cracked door. "She's nothing. She'll be fine eating in the back." Then laughter. Another voice, my mom's voice. A soft chuckle of agreement. My throat tightened and my eyes burned, but I forced myself to blink it back. I had learned a long time ago that tears only gave them more material. They had spent my entire life critiquing my size, my clothes, my choices, my work. They said I lacked ambition when I chose a steady job reviewing financial applications instead of chasing a glamorous career. They mocked my weight every chance they got. They treated me like a shadow trailing behind Victoria's glow. And I, for reasons I still don't fully understand, kept showing up, hoping things would change. I sat there in that kitchen, surrounded by cooks and servers, owning one undeniable truth. They had finally said out loud what they had always believed. I was nothing to them. A burden, an embarrassment, something to hide. The thing is, sometimes when a person is pushed into the smallest corner, something in them stops shrinking. Something stands up inside. I stood from the chair. My knees were weak, but I stood anyway. I walked out through the swinging door. The hallway lights were too bright, and I had to blink until the blur sharpened. A pair of bridesmaids brushed past, talking about the photographer's schedule. No one paid attention to me, which was exactly the way my family wanted it. I stepped into an empty alcove near the exit, pulled out my phone, and tapped a number I knew by heart. I had never planned to dial it today, maybe not ever. But standing in that kitchen, something in me snapped into place like a puzzle piece that had been waiting years to be found. The line clicked. A man answered. "Ellie, submit the case." There was a pause. The kind of pause that usually means, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" He finally said, "Are you sure?" I looked down the hallway toward the ballroom doors. I could hear faint music starting up. Victoria must have been posing for photos. Everything in her world was perfectly timed. I said, "Do it." I ended the call. My hands didn't shake anymore. I slipped my phone back into my purse and turned around, letting my eyes drift toward the kitchen door. The voices had quieted. The air felt colder now, calmer, like the moment before a storm pulls itself together. No one in that ballroom knew what I had just set in motion. No one knew what that single decision would ripple into. Not Victoria, not my mom, not the man she had just married, whose company name I had only recently begun to recognize. But I knew, and for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. If you're still listening, I'm curious where you are right now. Are you cooking, driving, knitting on your couch? Let me know, because this moment, right here in that icy hallway, was the moment everything in my life turned in a direction I never expected. And it all started with a metal chair in the kitchen and a phone call. 6 weeks before the wedding, I was not thinking about lace or centerpieces or how my sister would look walking down the aisle. I was thinking about a spreadsheet that would not stop bothering me. I work in Denver at a public health funding office in a mid-rise building that smells like burned coffee and printer toner by 9 every morning. My title sounds fancier than it feels. Senior Analyst for Program Review. What I really do is sit with stacks of applications from clinics and research, projects and community health programs, and try to figure out who is telling the truth and who is trying to game the system. It is not glamorous. There are no glossy photos or ribbon cuttings, but it is the one place in my life where people ask what I think and then actually listen. That morning started like any other. I rode the light rail from my small apartment near downtown, squeezed between a guy in a construction jacket and an older woman knitting, something blue. I watched the city roll past and thought vaguely about lunch. I did not know yet that a single file in my inbox was about to tie my quiet work life to the loudest parts of my family. By 8:30, I was at my desk on the 10th floor, the cardigan already off because the heat in our office never quite matched the season. I logged into the system, scrolled through the queue, and there it was. A new application flagged high priority. The originating address was a corporate one I did not recognize at first glance. Something with Aspen in the name and a long string of letters after it. I clicked it open and skimmed the summary. A private biomedical company based near Aspen asking for a large support package for a new treatment they claimed would improve access for underserved communities. They had all the right buzzwords: rural, underserved, innovation. It was the kind of narrative that usually made people upstairs excited. My job is to look past the narrative. I pulled the financials. On the surface, it looked tight. Almost too tight. The revenue numbers climbed neatly year over year in a way that made my stomach do a little twist. Real growth is rarely that smooth. I checked their tax forms, cross-referenced what they sent with what was on file in public databases. 2 years matched. 1 did not. A line that should have shown a loss was instead rounded up into something that looked like a modest gain. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Little things like that are where stories slip. Either someone made a very convenient mistake, or they were hoping no one would. Dig too deeply. I made a note in the margin of my review sheet. Verify third-year tax record. Request clarification. I kept going. Their projected expenses for the next 3 years seemed off, too. Allocations for patient assistance programs were impressive. Very impressive. It almost felt like they were trying to dazzle whoever was reading. But the staff costs for the same period were oddly low. If you are going to run that many clinics, you need people. Real people. Nurses, support staff, drivers. Those salaries should be there. They were not. I rubbed my eyes and sipped my coffee. It was already lukewarm. I clicked open their narrative attachments. There were a few internal memos that someone had apparently included by accident. Then I saw one line buried halfway down a page. We will adjust the projections to present the strongest possible case for support. I have read enough corporate speak to know that sometimes that kind of sentence is harmless, and sometimes It is not. It depends on what they mean by adjust and how far they are willing to bend. I added another note. Potential inflation of projections. Flag for preliminary review. Around 10, my friend Mia rolled her chair over from the next cubicle. Mia is a case manager who has the loudest laugh in the whole office and a permanent supply of peppermint tea packets in her drawer. She gave me a sideways look. You have your, "Why is this file annoying me?" face, she said, without actually saying those words, because she never needs to. We have worked together long enough that she can read me the way I read numbers. Corporate application, I said in my own head more than out loud. Skimming through another table, claims they want to expand access in mountain towns. Some numbers feel off. Mia nodded like she already knew the exact type. The ones that show up with glossy presentations and a lot of big promises. The ones that do not understand we read the fine print for a living. She went back to her desk and I returned to the screen. I knew what my role was at this stage. I was not there to destroy anyone. I was not there to approve them either. I was there to ask the questions no one else wanted to ask and decide whether the file should move forward clean or go into what we called preliminary investigation. That step did not mean guilt. It meant caution. By lunchtime, I had filled nearly an entire digital page with little red flags. Missing tax confirmations, overly optimistic projections, curious language in internal notes. Nothing that screamed outright fraud yet, but enough that my instincts would not let it go. I clicked save and leaned back, letting my chair squeak as it settled. Outside my window, the Denver skyline shimmered in the thin winter light. I thought about heading down to the sandwich shop on the corner. Before I could grab my coat, an alert pinged in the corner of my screen. New personal email. I opened it and saw the familiar scripted font of my sister's name. Victoria Harper and Daniel Collins request the honor of your presence. It was her wedding invitation. My eyes skimmed the details. Late January, at a resort outside Aspen. Ceremony in the afternoon, receptions to follow. The kind of event where everyone would wear something sleek and understated, and I would be the one tugging at my dress, hoping the sleeves did not cut into my arms in every photo. I sat there for a long moment, the cursor blinking beside the word RSVP, as if it were tapping its foot. Impatiently. Part of me wanted to decline, to send a polite regret and avoid the whole thing. I could already hear my mom if I did, though. Her voice was tight with disappointment. Families show up for each other, Ellie. Do not make this about you. So I clicked accept and told myself I could handle it. One weekend. I could manage one weekend of pretending everything was fine. That night at home, in my small third-floor walk-up, I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and made boxed macaroni and cheese for dinner. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I turned on some soft music and tried not to think about the dress I did not yet own, or the way Victoria would glow in a gown that would probably be custom, fitted and perfect in every photo. I reminded myself that I had my own life, my own place, my own work that mattered. The next morning back at the office, the Aspen file was waiting for me, like it had not slept. I spent the next few days moving between other cases and that one, circling back to it like a stone in my shoe that would not stop rubbing. I requested additional documentation through the official portal. I asked for clarification on their staffing. I checked more databases. Every time I thought I could let it move forward, something small would tug me back. Late one Thursday afternoon, as the office was starting to thin out and people were talking about weekend plans, another email popped into my work inbox. The sender address was from the same Aspen company. It looked like a simple follow-up. I clicked it open while I chewed the last bite of a granola bar. My stomach sank as I read. The message was clearly not meant for me. It was part of an internal thread that had somehow been forwarded to the funding office by mistake. I could see the earlier messages on the chain, executives trading comments and timelines. The last line stood out in a way that made my skin prickle. We really need this application pushed through before that wedding weekend, or the entire plan falls apart. I read it again, slower. Before that wedding weekend, I glanced over at the corner of my desk, where the ivory envelope with my sister's invitation still sat, half tucked under a stack of reports. Aspen, late January. I felt a thin, cold line trace down my back. It could have been a coincidence. There are a lot of weddings in the world, a lot of weekends, a lot of people who think the universe revolves around their big day. But as I sat there, listening to the heating system knock in the ceiling and the buzz of the copy machine down the hall, something inside me whispered that this was not random, that the company on my screen and the man my sister was about to marry were not as separate as they seemed. I did what I always do when something does not add up. I saved the email, tagged it for follow-up, and added a simple line to my notes. Potential conflict, connection to personal events. Monitor closely. Then I closed the file, shut down my computer for the day, and tried to tell myself I was borrowing trouble. I grabbed my coat, walked out into the cold evening air, and headed toward the light rail station, pretending I did not feel the faint beginning of a knot forming low in my chest. The knot that started forming in my chest that night did not loosen by morning. It followed me home on the train, sat with me at my kitchen table while I ate a bowl of cereal for dinner, and lingered like a faint pressure behind my ribs long after I went to bed. I kept telling myself it was just work stress, just another complicated file that would eventually sort itself out. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel something shifting. The way air changes right before a storm rolls in, and storms have a way of pulling old things to the surface. Maybe that is why, as I sat in my apartment a few days later with Victoria's wedding invitation on my coffee table, my mind drifted back to memories I thought I had packed away for good. I was 34 years old, sitting on my sofa with my hair still damp from a rushed shower, staring at Victoria's wedding invitation on my coffee table. When memories I never asked for began to surface again. They always did that when something involved my family, like old bruises reminding me they were still there, no matter how much time had passed. I did not go looking for them. They came on their own. The first one came from when I was 10 years old. It was summer in Fort Collins, hot enough that the pavement shimmered. My mom had decided that I needed to lose weight before school started. She bought a stack of diet books and plastic containers for meal prep and told me we would do this together. Though she never changed a thing about her own plate, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of something green and watery, while Victoria stood by the refrigerator in a pink tank top and matching shorts. She was 12 then, already long-legged and light on her feet, the kind of girl who looked graceful even when she was just pouring juice. Mom kept looking at her with this proud softness I never got. Look at her, Ellie. Slim without even trying. You should follow her example. Try to have a little discipline. I stabbed the soggy lettuce with my fork and nodded, because my mom's voice always made me want to disappear. Victoria twirled a strand of her blonde hair and smiled like she was in on something I was not. Later that afternoon, she got to eat a chocolate ice cream bar while I chewed carrot sticks that tasted like cold water. She licked the ice cream slowly in front of me. I do not think she did it to be cruel. I think it was simply easy for her to enjoy things, while I learned early that enjoyment always came with warnings attached. The second memory was from when I was 16. I had studied for months for the statewide math evaluation because numbers made sense to me. They sat still. They obeyed rules. They did not change their opinion of you based on how you looked in a dress. I ended up winning first place for our school district. My math teacher had even pulled me aside afterward and told me she was proud of me and that I should think about college scholarships. The evening of the award, our whole family went out for dinner at a diner off I-25. I wore my best jeans and a buttoned cardigan because I thought it would make my mom look at me differently. Dad ordered burgers. Mom picked at a salad. Victoria wore her cheerleading jacket because she had just made the varsity squad, even though she was only 17. The waitress congratulated her on that before she even said hello to the table. Mom beamed. Our girl is just a natural. So poised, so pretty. All the boys at school are going to be chasing her. I remember waiting for her to say something about my award. Just one sentence. I kept expecting her to turn to me and say, "And Ellie won something today too." But she never did. The waitress moved on. Mom kept talking about Victoria's routines and how they needed new white sneakers for her next game. The only acknowledgement I got was Dad mumbling, "Good job, kiddo," while he squeezed ketchup onto his plate. Victoria did not even look up from her fries. At home that night, I put the award certificate in a shoebox under my bed. I have not looked at it since. The third memory was from when I was 25. I had just graduated from the University of Northern Colorado with a degree in public policy, something I worked through night classes and part-time jobs to finish. My whole extended family came to the ceremony. We met afterward in the parking lot. I wore the navy gown the university gave us, and my cap sat crooked because I could never quite get things to look neat on me. Mom hugged me, or rather, she put her arms around me in a way that looked like a hug from far away. Then she pulled back and said words that I did not understand until years later. Ellie, not everyone gets by on looks like your sister. You have to make sure you carry yourself with kindness and modesty. You know, since you are more of an everyday girl. I stood there with traffic roaring behind us and a folded diploma in my hand. She had managed to congratulate me and diminish me in the same breath. Victoria showed up late because she had been out celebrating with friends. She wore a short white dress that showed off her tan shoulders, and everyone swarmed her like she was the one graduating. I do not think my mom ever intended to be cruel, but I learned young that cruelty does not need intention. Sometimes it happens through habit. As I sat in my apartment recalling these years, those moments braided themselves together like strands of the same thread. It was always the same pattern. Little cuts, small dismissals, comments said too casually or too quickly. I grew up believing I had to earn space in my own family, while Victoria was handed hers at birth. I kept the peace for decades because I wanted to have a family to come home to. Even if it cost me parts of myself, even if I had to pretend things did not hurt. That night, after reviewing the Aspen file and staring at the wedding invitation for too long, I called Mia on speaker and paced my small living room. She knew my history well enough that I did not need to explain why my stomach felt tight. She asked if I was going, and I said yes. She sighed in that soft way that makes everything feel a little less sharp. I know you want harmony, Ellie. Just remember you do not have to make yourself small to get it. I promised I would try. But promises like that were easier in theory. A few days later, after work, I stopped at a department store looking for a dress to wear to the wedding. The upscale section was filled with glittering gowns and sleek silhouettes that I knew would not fit over my thighs. I wandered through the racks until I found a dark forest green dress with sleeves that did not pinch and a waistline that hit a little higher than expected. It felt comfortable, safe. I bought it without trying it on. That evening, my phone rang while I was making tea in my kitchen. It was my mom. Her voice was smooth and clipped, the kind of tone she used when she needed something from me. Ellie, I hope you are planning to wear something tasteful to the wedding. Something that does not draw attention. Victoria has worked very hard to make everything look elegant. She paused, then added the part I knew was coming. Dark colors would be best. Nothing bright. Nothing that clashes in photographs. I swallowed and kept my voice steady. Yes, Mom, I already bought something. Good. I am glad we understand each other. Then, without asking about my job or my life or anything else, she hung up. I stood there in my kitchen with the faint smell of peppermint tea rising around me and stared at the phone like it had delivered a message I should have. Expected, but still somehow cut deeper than it should have. I felt that old, familiar weight settle on my chest, the same one I had carried since childhood. The weight of needing to be pleasing, the weight of wanting, against all logic, to be accepted. I set the phone on the counter and took a slow breath. I reminded myself I was 34 years old. I paid my own bills. I had my own apartment. I had built a life that worked even if no one in my family bothered to understand it. Still, her words stuck. Dark colors, not drawing attention. An instruction I had spent a lifetime mastering. I touched the dress bag hanging from my closet door and felt a pinch of shame, mixed with stubbornness. The dress was dark, forest green. It did not scream for attention. It fit exactly into the space my mom had carved out for me. It hurt, and I hated that it still did. As the week stretched on, the Aspen file kept returning to my mind. The numbers, the projections, the accidental email. And now this wedding felt less like a celebration and more like another test. I could not pass. Everything seemed to be curling toward the same point without my permission. I did not know yet how tightly those worlds were tied together. I only knew that unease had settled into me like cold air seeping beneath a door. By the time the weekend approached, I felt worn thin. Between work pressure and family expectations, something in me felt stretched in opposite directions. I told myself again that I could get through one wedding. Just one. I could keep the peace. I had no idea then how wrong I was. Nor did I know how much that determination to keep peace would crumble once I stepped into Aspen and saw exactly where my place was in my sister's world. That moment was still waiting for me, sharp as glass, only a few days away. The knot in my chest followed me for days after that, tightening a little each morning as the wedding got closer. 2 weeks before the ceremony, my work inbox began filling with new documents tied to the Aspen application, each one more confusing than the last. I tried to tell myself it was normal for large projects. Bigger proposals always came with thicker files and thicker headaches. But something about this one made me pause more often than I wanted to admit. On Tuesday morning, just after 8, I opened a new upload from the company. It contained a revised budget sheet and a letter signed by their chief executive officer. I scanned past the greeting and stopped at the signature line. The name was Carter Hayes. It meant nothing to me at first. Carter is a common name. Hayes is a common name. Aspen has hundreds of businesses. I closed the file and wrote a reminder to check the corporate registration later. But instead of focusing on the work, I kept thinking about the wedding invitation still sitting on my dining table at home. I had not mustered the energy to move it anywhere. Every time I looked at it, I felt caught between wanting to fit in and wanting to run the other way. By lunchtime, the sky over Denver had turned a dull gray, and the office lights flickered as if they were tired too. I went down to the break room where Mia was adding hot water to a mug of tea. She glanced at the paperwork under my arm. Aspen file again. She sounded half amused, half sympathetic. I nodded. Every time I think I understand something, they send another document that complicates it. She sipped her tea and lowered her voice. That happens sometimes, especially when someone is trying to make things look cleaner than they are. You know the drill. Trust your gut. I did know the drill. My gut just felt cloudier than usual. I thanked her and went back to my desk, pulling up the new documents again. One table was labeled Anticipated Community Impact. It was filled with descriptions of programs that seemed impressive, almost too impressive. Expanded outreach, free screenings, mobile clinics in rural counties. It read like a wish list rather than something grounded in the staffing, numbers they had submitted earlier. I compared the figures again, flipping between the pages on my screen. If they planned to reach that many people, they would need a lot more staff than what they had budgeted. They would need vehicles, equipment, and more administrative support. None of that appeared anywhere in the breakdown. I made another note. Discrepancy in outreach estimates. An hour later, my personal email pinged on my phone. It was a message from my mom, which was unusual during the day, unless she wanted something. I opened it reluctantly. Ellie, please remember not to arrive too early at the wedding. The planner will be busy, and Victoria needs everything to run smoothly. Also, it is best if you do not wander around once you get there. We want to avoid any confusion with the seating and photography. I read the message twice, feeling my stomach tighten. Not wander around. Avoid confusion. It was written politely, but the meaning was clear. Stay out of the way. Do not interfere. Do not be seen. For a moment, I just sat there, holding my phone, letting the familiar sting of her words settle in. I told myself not to overreact. She was probably stressed. Weddings make people say things without thinking. Still, it felt like one more nudge toward a corner I had spent my life being pushed into. I turned back to my computer, but the screen felt blurry. The Aspen file glowed at me, like it was waiting for me to connect dots that were still scattered on the table. I forced myself to keep going. Numbers were safer than feelings. By late afternoon, I had built a list of concerns long enough to send to the preliminary review team. But something stopped me from hitting submit. The application was suspicious, yes, but I had seen worse, and yet my instincts would not let go. Too much pressure from the company. Too many emails with language that did not sit right. Too much emphasis on rushing. When I caught myself rereading the corrected tax forms for the third time, I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples. The building around me had grown quieter as people headed home. I stood, stretched my back, and walked toward the window. The city lights flickered on below, headlights turning into ribbons of white and red on Spear Boulevard. As I stood there, thinking about numbers and weddings, and a feeling I could not name, another alert chimed on my computer. A system-generated email. I walked back to my desk and clicked it open. The subject line read, "Review option notification." I opened it and saw a short, formal paragraph. It was the kind of message our office received when a case had enough irregularities to qualify for a possible freeze while investigators verify details. If you choose to submit the case, the message read, all related financial processes will be temporarily frozen pending review. This action cannot be undone. I stared at it for a long moment. The words seemed heavier than they should have been. Freeze. Pending review. One decision. One click. It felt too big, like something I needed more time to understand. I sat down again and folded my hands under my chin. My mind drifted back to the way the company had emphasized the timeline, the need to move quickly, the urgency surrounding that weekend, the wedding weekend, my sister's wedding weekend. I tried to shake the thought off. Lots of things happen on weekends. Lots of people rush funding deadlines at the end of the month. I was probably tying threads together that did not belong together. Still, the knot in my chest tightened again. I closed the notification without taking action and pushed away from the desk. My office felt too warm, like there was not enough air. I gathered my bag and turned off my monitor. On the way out, Mia called from behind me. "Ellie, heading home already?" "Yeah, just a long day." She gave me a gentle smile. "Let your brain rest. You will see everything more clearly in the morning." I wished I believed that. Outside, the wind had picked up. I wrapped my coat tighter as I walked to the light rail station. The sky was nearly black, a few faint stars peeking through the layer of clouds. When the train arrived, I sank into a plastic seat and watched the city pass by in blurry streaks of color. My reflection in the window looked tired, the kind of tiredness that comes from more than a day of work. At home, I failed to muster the energy to cook. I heated leftover soup and ate it standing at the counter. The invitation was still sitting where I had left it, the corner slightly bent from days of being handled and set aside. I touched it lightly and felt a mix of irritation and heaviness settle into me. 2 weeks. That was all that stood between me and another family gathering where I would be reminded of everything I was not. Everything I had tried not to care about, but somehow always did. I went to bed early, but lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of traffic outside my window. The freeze notification replayed in my head. Not the whole message, just the part that felt like it had been written for me specifically. If you choose. I turned onto my side, pulled the blanket higher, and tried to focus on my breathing. The Aspen Company was just another applicant. The wedding was just another event. My mom's email was just another reminder of my place. At least, that is what I kept telling myself. But deep down, something colder whispered that nothing about this was random. Something was beginning to shift. I could feel it, even if I could not see it yet. And by the time the next morning came, that feeling had settled so deep that it stayed with me as I unlocked my office door, sat down at my desk, and opened my inbox again, bracing myself for whatever waited inside. What waited inside that morning was not a new file or an answer to my questions. It was a calendar reminder from my mom. Dinner at the house next Sunday to show Victoria's dress. I stared at the little notification on my screen for a moment. It pulsed there, harmless looking, like a reminder to water a plant. 1 week before the wedding. One more performance before the main show. I dismissed it and tried to focus on the Aspen documents. But my mind kept drifting ahead to Sunday, to my mom's living room in Fort Collins, to Victoria holding court the way she always did. By the time the end of the week rolled around, that knot in my chest had settled in like a permanent tenant. Sunday afternoon, the sky was the flat white of January clouds when I pulled into my mom's driveway. The snow that had fallen earlier in the week had turned into gray slush along the edges of the curb. The house looked the same as always. The shutters needed repainting. The porch light leaned a little to the left. The flower bed out front was bare except for a few stubborn brown stems. It was the kind of place people drive by without noticing. Yet inside, it held every version of me my family had ever seen and never really looked at. I sat in the car for a minute, watching my breath fog up the windshield. I had worn the forest green dress under my coat so I could show it to them if they asked. Part of me already knew they would not ask. I stepped out anyway, boots crunching softly on the gritty snow, and walked up the front steps. The door was unlocked, like it always was on Sundays. I pushed it open and stepped into the hallway. Warmth and the smell of roasted chicken wrapped around me. From the living room, I could hear my mom's voice, light and bright, and Victoria's laugh underneath it. "Ellie, is that you?" my mom called. "Yeah, Mom," I said, shrugging off my coat. "It is me." I walked into the living room and stopped. Victoria was standing in the center of the room on a little rug, her wedding dress hanging from a portable garment rack beside her. It was a pale ivory with lace sleeves and a neckline that would photograph beautifully. Her blonde hair was swept up into a loose bun, even though the wedding was still a week away. She liked to rehearse her image. Mom was fussing with a pair of delicate heels, turning them in her hands like fragile artwork. On the coffee table sat an open binder filled with vendor lists, seating charts, and swatches. The television was on mute, some home renovation show playing to an unseen audience. Mom looked at Victoria with a softness I knew by heart. "Our girl is going to make such an impression on his family," she said, smoothing the hem of the dress with gentle fingers. "The Collins are very discerning people. Everything has to be perfect." Victoria smiled, eyes shining. "Dad says his parents are old money Denver. They are used to country clubs and charity galas. It will be good for all of us." "All of us," I repeated silently, though it was clear she did not mean me. I stood there, still holding my coat, while they continued talking like I was part of the furniture. Victoria finally glanced over, her gaze flicking up and down my frame. "Oh, you made it, Ellie." I hung my coat on the back of a chair. "Yeah, I came straight from home." Mom nodded briskly. "Good. We were just talking about the rehearsal dinner. Daniel's parents offered to host it at their house. Can you imagine? Their patio looks out over the golf course. It is like something out of a magazine." She said it like she was already living there, as if she had been waiting her whole life to step into their world and leave ours behind. Victoria turned back to the dress. "I want them to see I fit in. No drama, no surprises. Just a beautiful, elegant wedding." The words, "no surprises," lodged themselves somewhere between my ribs. I shifted my weight, feeling the fabric of my dress press against my skin under my coat. Mom sat down and leafed through the binder. "We have got the flowers, the quartet, the photographer. The guest list is just right. His family is bringing important people, Ellie, partners and colleagues. We cannot afford for anything to look out of place." I could feel where this was heading before they even said it. I had been in enough versions of this conversation to recognize the pattern. Victoria did not look at me when she said, in an almost offhand way, "Just do not embarrass me, okay?" She said it lightly, like a joke shared between sisters, but there was no warmth in her voice, just pressure wrapped in a smile. I swallowed. "What exactly do you think I am going to do?" Victoria laughed, a small sound that did not reach her eyes. "You know what I mean. Do not show up late. Do not wear something loud. Do not pick a fight with Mom if she says the wrong thing. Just be chill. Be chill." As if my very existence was a potential problem that needed managing. Mom added, "You know how easily people notice things in high society settings. We want them to see us as refined, classy." She glanced at my midsection, just for a heartbeat. "It is important that everything is balanced in the photos." Balanced. That was her word for thin lines and matching faces, not for messy, complicated daughters who did not fit the picture. I felt my cheeks heat. "I have a dress," I said, my voice coming out a little sharper than I intended. "It is dark. It is simple. It will not steal anyone's spotlight." Mom seemed satisfied by that. "Good. That is all we ask. All we ask." As if what they were asking was small. as if they were not asking me to make myself invisible in my own family on my own sister's wedding day. Adam appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Well, look at you, kiddo," he said. "Long time no see." I gave him a small smile. "Hey, Dad." He took in the scene quickly, eyes moving from the dress to the binder to my face. Something flickered there, a kind of apology he never seemed to manage out loud. He cleared his throat and asked if anyone wanted iced tea. Mom waved him away. "Later, Tom. We are busy. We have so much to finalize." He retreated quietly. It struck me then how often he slipped out of these moments instead of stepping into them. How many times he had watched my mom talk over me and said nothing. How often he had let my sister's needs fill every room. Victoria pulled the dress off the rack and held it up against her body in front of the mirror. She was radiant, and she knew it. Mom clapped her hands softly, eyes shining. "They are going to love you, honey. They are going to see how lucky their son is. And if everything goes well, this could open doors for our whole family." For a second, I thought she might glance at me, acknowledge that I, too, was part of this family she kept talking about. She did not. The conversation shifted to table linens and escort cards. I sat down on the edge of an armchair, feeling like a guest in my childhood home. I listened as they discussed impressive job titles, connections, and which side of the family would look better in which photos. My name did not come up once. After about 20 minutes, I stood and said I should probably head back. "I have some work to finish tonight." Mom barely looked up. "All right. Just remember what we talked about. Dark, simple, and please do not do anything to draw attention. This wedding is our one shot with his family. We cannot afford missteps." That word again. We. As if I were not included. As if I were some external risk factor, instead of a daughter. In the hallway, I slipped on my coat and reached for my keys. As I bent to tie my boots, I heard a rustle from the living room. My mom's voice dropped low, but the house was old and voices carried. If she ruins our chances with his family, I will never forgive her. Then Victoria, softer. "She will not. I will keep her out of the way." My hand froze on my shoelace. I stayed there for a breath, crouched by the door like a child playing hide-and-seek, though no one was looking for me. The words sank in slowly. Ruins our chances. Keep her out of the way. I felt like a stain they were afraid would not come out in the wash. I straightened, heartbeat loud in my ears. For a moment, I thought about walking back into the living room and asking them to say it to my face, to explain exactly how they thought I could single-handedly damage their standing with people I had never met. But I knew how that would go. I had seen that show before. They would say I misheard. They would tell me I was sensitive, emotional, making things about me. So I opened the front door quietly instead. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean after the heaviness inside. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me with more care than it deserved. In the driveway, I stood beside my car and looked back at the house. Through the front window, I could see my mom moving around, her hands sweeping through the air as she talked. Victoria's white dress caught a bit of light, glowing faintly like a promise that did not include me. I slid into the driver's seat and rested my forehead against the steering wheel for a moment. A part of me felt foolish for still hoping they would ever see me as more than something to be managed. Another part felt something harder settling in. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to clarity. They were not worried about my feelings. They were worried about their image, their opportunity, their step up into a world they thought would finally prove they were worth something. And I was the piece of the puzzle they did not know where to hide. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and headed back toward Denver. The sky was getting dark, and the road ahead shimmered faintly with leftover ice. I turned on the radio, but did not really hear the music. My mind kept replaying my mom's words over and over. If she ruins our chances, I will never forgive her. By the time I reached my apartment, my jaw ached from clenching it. I kicked off my boots, hung my coat, and walked straight to my bedroom. The green dress hung on the closet door, waiting. I ran my fingers along the fabric. It was a good dress. There was nothing wrong with it. The problem was never the dress. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at it, and felt the lines between my work life and my family life blur a little more. One world where my judgment mattered, and another where my presence was seen as a threat. I thought about the freeze notification, about the choice it offered. Submit the case or let it slide. At that point, I still did not know the full story behind the Aspen Company. I did not know that the names in their paperwork were woven into my sister's future. All I knew was that the week ahead would be about appearances, and that my job, as far as my family was concerned, was to disappear as much as possible. I turned off the bedroom light and sat in the dim hallway for a few minutes, listening to the quiet. Somewhere deep inside, that knot in my chest pulled tighter, as if it already sensed that everything was moving toward a breaking point I could not avoid. I barely slept the night before the wedding. I kept rolling from one side of the bed to the other, the knot in my chest so tight it felt like a small stone pressing up under my life. Ribs. When the sun finally crept in through the blinds, pale and cold, I got up with the feeling that the day had already started without me. I moved slowly through my apartment, turning on the coffee maker, heating a skillet, trying to keep my hands busy. The quiet felt louder than usual. My cat brushed against my leg, as if she sensed something was off. Maybe she did. Animals know when the air changes, when a storm is nearby. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and pulled my hair back into a simple, low bun. I added a touch of makeup, just enough to smooth things out. A little mascara, a soft, rosy blush, lip color that looked like my natural shade but better. I kept everything light. I wanted to look like I had made an effort, but not like I was trying too hard. That was the balance my mom always wanted me to aim for. Noticeable enough to seem respectable. Forgettable enough to keep me from drawing attention. The forest green dress was hanging near the door where I had left it. I slipped it on and took in the sight of myself in the full-length mirror. The dress fit fine. Not amazing, not awful, fine. The empire waist skimmed over the parts of my body I usually tried not to think about. The sleeves were loose enough not to pinch. I looked presentable. Not special, not embarrassing. Presentable. I grabbed my coat, my small purse, and the wedding invitation with the directions on the back. The drive from Denver to Aspen took a little over 2 hours that morning. The highway curved along the mountains, the frozen landscape glittering in the sunlight. It should have been calming. It was beautiful in every direction. Snow dusted the pines. The sky stretched bright and endless overhead, but my mind kept drifting back to the comments my mom and Victoria had made, words looping through my head in a steady rhythm. Stay out of the way. Dark colors. Do not embarrass us. By the time I reached the resort, my hands were damp on the steering wheel. Ridgeview Lodge stood tall against the mountain backdrop, its wooden beams and stone pillars giving it that rustic elegance that wealthy families like to brag about. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive cars. Glossy black sedans, white SUVs with tinted windows. Guests in tailored coats stepped out with the effortless confidence of people who have never doubted whether they belong somewhere. I parked farther away, near the tree line, where the snow was still untouched. I sat there a moment, feeling the engine tick quietly as it cooled. I whispered to myself, "You can do this. Just breathe. Be polite. Be calm. Be small. You are only here for the ceremony and the reception. That is all." I stepped out into the crisp air and made my way toward the entrance. 2 staff members stood by the doors, holding them open for guests. When their eyes fell on me, there was a flicker of recognition, the kind you see when someone has been given instructions about you before you arrived. One of them offered a tight smile. Ellie Richards. Right. Let me check something. He pulled out his phone and typed quickly. The other held the door and gestured for me to enter. Inside, warmth spilled through the lobby, along with the faint scent of pine and vanilla. Guests gathered in little clusters, chatting with drinks in hand, looking polished and relaxed. I spotted the coordinator table near the far wall and walked toward it. A woman in a headset looked up and forced a bright smile. "You are the bride's sister, yes, Ellie." I nodded. She shifted uneasily. "Right. Okay, if you can wait just a moment. We are sorting out some seating adjustments." The bride had a few last-minute preferences. Her tone made my stomach drop. Last-minute preferences usually meant something had already been decided. Something about me. I stood off to the side, near a tall floral arrangement that smelled like fresh lilies. I tried to disappear into the petals, into the shadows, anywhere but here. I heard a bridesmaid laughing and turned slightly. She was one of Victoria's friends from college, someone I barely knew. She spotted me and waved before walking over. Her hair was curled into soft waves, and she wore a pale champagne dress that shimmered under the lights. Ellie. Hi. She smiled, then leaned in the way women do when they want to share gossip. Congratulations. The whole thing is so beautiful. Thanks, I said softly. She lowered her voice without lowering her excitement. I should not say this, but, well, Victoria said you might ruin the photos if they put you in the front row. So they are trying to figure out where to put you. Just ignore the drama. Weddings bring it out of people. My ears rang for a moment. I blinked at her, unsure whether she realized she had just stabbed me with a smile on her face. Ruin the photos. The words felt heavy and familiar. I managed a very small nod. Thanks for letting me know. She hopped away to join the others, leaving me alone with the floral arrangement again. The coordinator returned. If you would follow me, Ellie, we have a temporary spot for you while we finalize seating. It will only be for a few minutes. Temporary spot. My chest tightened again. I followed her down a hallway lined with framed photographs of mountain landscapes. The sounds of chatter and music grew faint. We passed the ceremony space entirely. I knew because I saw the white chairs arranged in neat rows through the doorway. The arrangement looked perfect, balanced, no empty spaces. That was when I realized I was not going to be sitting in any of those chairs. We kept going, farther than made sense. I wanted to ask where we were going, but the words stayed stuck in my throat. I did not want to seem difficult. I did not want to prove my family right. As we rounded a corner, a catering staff member stopped the coordinator. He lifted his phone and whispered something urgent, the kind of whisper that means bad news or instructions that cannot wait. The coordinator glanced at me with an apologetic wince. She checked her phone and read a message quickly, holding it close to her chest. Her face changed. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed the way her jaw tightened and her eyes darted to mine. She cleared her throat. I am sorry, Ellie. The bride wants you placed in the back service area until the ceremony ends. It is a space we use for staging. You will still be able to hear everything, though. I stared at her. The words hung between us, cold and heavy. She did not look cruel. She looked uncomfortable, like she knew exactly what she had been asked to do and hated it, but had no power to refuse. All I managed to say was, I understand. But inside, something cracked, a small, clean crack, like ice splitting under a boot. She led me farther down the hall, past the staff lockers, past the supply shelves, past the tables with stacks of napkins and trays. My breath grew shallow, each step feeling heavier than the last. We reached a large swinging door. Sounds of clattering dishes and sizzling pans drifted through the metal. She pushed it open and gestured for me to step inside. Before I crossed the threshold, I hesitated. I turned my head slightly, listening. I could hear laughter coming from the ceremony area, music from the quartet, voices drifting down the hall. All of that belonged to the world I was supposed to be part of, and yet, here I was, being guided into a kitchen like I was an inconvenience that needed to be hidden away. I took a breath and stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Warm, humid, sharp with garlic and onion. Chefs moving briskly. Plate clattering. The rhythm of a place busy with a job to do. My escort pointed to a metal chair tucked beside a prep table. Just wait here. Someone will check on you before the reception. Her voice held an apology, and she was not allowed to speak. I nodded again. She slipped out, the door swinging closed behind her. For a moment, I just stood there. My hands hung loosely at my sides. I felt the weight of my dress, the sound of distant music muffled by walls, the sharp sting of humiliation rising in my throat. A chef brushed past me to grab a pot. He barely noticed I was there. I sat down on the metal chair, the cold seat pressed against the back of my legs. I clasped my hands together tightly so they would not shake. Somewhere beyond the door, the ceremony was beginning. Guests were being seated. Victoria was probably smoothing her dress and adjusting her veil. My mom would be glowing with pride, telling someone how everything had come together perfectly. Perfectly. A server walked by carrying a tray of small pastries. She paused when she saw me, offering a sympathetic smile. They told me not to bring any food back here for guests. Sorry. It was not her fault. None of this was her fault. I gave her a small nod. It is fine. But it was not fine. Not the dress I bought to make them happy. Not the drive I made through icy roads. Not the way I had tried to blend in, make myself easy, small, quiet. None of it mattered. They had already decided where they thought I belonged. In the back, out of sight, hidden, the sounds of the kitchen filled the silence in my chest. Pans clinking, a timer going off, someone calling for more garnish. I closed my eyes for just a moment, trying to steady the hurt. Then, somewhere outside, a faint burst of applause echoed through the hallway. The ceremony had started, and I was nowhere near it. The applause drifted into silence, leaving only the muffled clatter of the kitchen behind me. I opened my eyes slowly. My heartbeat settled into a quiet, steady rhythm. Whatever ache I felt had softened into something sharper, calmer, almost cool. I stood from the metal chair. My legs felt steady. My dress brushed lightly against my knees as I walked toward the swinging door. No one stopped me. The kitchen staff barely glanced up. To them, I was another shadow moving through the room. The hallway outside was startlingly quiet compared to the noise behind me. The ceremony music had faded. Guests must have settled into their seats. I walked toward the lobby, steps slow and controlled. The way someone moves when they finally decide they are done being afraid. I reached the bar in the main lounge. The bartender was arranging glasses on a shelf and looked up with polite confusion when he saw me. "Everything is okay, ma'am." He spoke softly, as if worried he had interrupted something private. I nodded. "Just getting some water." I reached for a tall glass from the counter, filled it halfway with ice, then added water from the tap handle. The cold spread through my fingers and up my wrist as I lifted the glass to my left. Lips. It grounded me, anchored me. For a brief moment, I let myself stare into the ballroom doors, cracked just enough for me to see the silhouettes of guests seated inside, shadows floating across rows of chairs, the glow of candles flickering along the aisle. Victoria must have been walking in by now, probably gliding with that perfect smile she practiced in the mirror since she was 15. I set the water down, pulled out my phone, and tapped the side button. The home screen lit up, a glowing rectangle in the dim lounge. Notifications started popping in almost immediately, small and quiet. File update. Aspen Mountain Pharmaceuticals. Status changed to under review. Another notification blinked in. Temporary freeze initiated. All associated financial processes halted, pending review. More followed. Cross-check flagged. Suspicious variances detected. Internal review algorithm second pass initiated. Each line appeared like a soft tap on my shoulder. Not harsh, not triumphant, just inevitable. The sequence I knew all too well. The system did not shout. It was not punished. It simply moved, step by step, through procedures written to protect the public from fraud. I slid the phone into my purse. The glass of water trembled under my fingers. It was not fear. It was like a lake freezing from the inside out. People around me chatted, moving in and out of the lobby as if nothing had shifted in the air. I stood next to the bar, sipping my water, letting the cold slip down my throat. Somewhere down the corridor, I heard the photographer calling out instructions. "Move a little closer. Hun down. Smile." I walked slowly toward the sound. When I reached the doorway that opened into the courtyard garden, I stopped at the threshold. Sunlight poured across the paving stones. The sky above Aspen was a bright winter blue, so clear it almost looked unreal. Guests spilled out into the courtyard for post-ceremony photos. Laughter floated through the crisp air. Everyone looked radiant and celebratory, unaware that anything was wrong. Victoria stood near the stone archway draped with white roses. Her veil caught the sunlight, and shimmered like frost. She held her bouquet in one hand and lifted her chin, angling her face the way she always did in pictures. Gregory stood beside her, handsome and polished, his posture straight and confident. And near them, in a cluster of people wearing expensive coats, stood Carter Hayes. I recognized him immediately. His face was unmistakable from the file photos. The CEO profile. The public speaking images. The company website headshot with his practiced smile. He looked almost exactly the same in person, except his expression was much softer now. Relaxed in this moment of family celebration. He was talking to an older man who must have been a relative from Gregory's side. His smile was warm and easy. Then his phone rang, a sharp ringtone that cut clean through the courtyard noise. He glanced at the screen. His relaxed expression shifted. Not dramatically, just the faint pull of a brow, the brief tightening around his mouth, sign only someone trained to read faces would catch. He stepped away from the group. Not far, just enough for privacy. He pressed one finger to his ear and answered. I watched. He listened. His posture changed in slow increments, shoulders stiffening. His hand lowered from his ear. His gaze sharpened on the stone tiles beneath his feet. A long moment passed before he spoke. It was short, quiet. His lips barely moved. Then he hung up. For several seconds, he did not move at all. Then he turned toward Gregory. His eyes were stark. The relaxed warmth was gone. In its place, something strained and brittle. Gregory noticed immediately. He stepped toward Carter, his expression puzzled. He asked something. I could not hear from this distance, but I could see his confusion clearly. Carter shook his head slightly. He leaned in and whispered something into Gregory's ear. Whatever he said made Gregory's face drain slowly of color. The photographer kept calling instructions. Bridesmaids drifted into position beside Victoria. No one else noticed what was unfolding just a few feet away, but I saw everything. Gregory's jaw tightened. His hand moved reflexively to his tie, tugging it slightly as if the air had suddenly grown thin. He looked over at Victoria, then to the guests, then at the phone, still in Carter's hand. His mother approached, asking what was wrong. Gregory lifted a hand to silence her without even realizing he had done it. His focus was entirely locked on Carter. Another bridesmaid whispered to Victoria that her new brother-in-law looked like he had seen a ghost. Victoria laughed lightly, assuming it was nerves or a bad joke. She had no idea. I took another sip of water, the ice clinking gently against my teeth. My phone buzzed in my purse. No one around me heard it. I opened it. Another update had appeared. Ongoing freeze confirmed. Further internal review triggered. Additional accounts accessed for verification. A final line appeared. High-value assets included in temporary hold. It did not state any numbers. It never did at this stage. But I knew the meaning. I knew the patterns. I had been inside this work for years. I could practically hear the system running in my mind. I knew exactly what level of assets would qualify as high value under this category. I knew what kind of accounts got flagged when financials did not align with tax reports. And I knew that freezes did not care about weddings. Behind me, a pair of guests walked toward the bar, talking loudly about the floral arrangements and the mountain view. Their voices faded as I stepped farther into the courtyard. Victoria had her back to me, laughing for another picture, tossing a soft smile over her shoulder, the way she did when she wanted to seem graceful and effortless. Carter's phone rang again. He stepped away once more. Just a few yards this time. His voice stayed low, but his posture said everything. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He ended the call and walked back to Gregory. Their conversation turned more urgent. Gregory looked like he wanted to disappear. His mother was asking questions again. His father was at his side now. The photographer grew irritated and waved at them to return for photos. But neither man moved. Like a slow ripple across water, more people began noticing their faces. Ellie, you all right standing by yourself? A passing guest asked lightly as she adjusted the strap on her purse. I nodded. Yes, I am fine. And I was. Peaceful, even. Not happy. Not angry, just steady in a way I had never felt around my family before. The group around Victoria shifted slightly. She finally noticed Gregory's absence and frowned in irritation. "Gregory, get over here. Pictures." He did not move. She frowned deeper and walked toward him, bouquet in hand. She said his name again. He looked at her but did not seem to see her. His focus was still split between her and Carter. Her irritation sharpened. "Gregory, what is going on?" He swallowed hard. Carter stepped in instead. "We need to talk. Now." The words were quiet but firm. Victoria blinked at him, unused to being spoken to that way. "Is this about catering? We handled everything already." Carter shook his head once. His face was pale. "No, it is not catering." Out of the corner of my eye, a server hurried across the courtyard carrying a tray of champagne. He glanced curiously at the group as he passed. One glass tilted slightly under his unsteady grip, but none spilled. Guests started whispering. Heads turned. The energy shifted like someone had pulled a thread through the crowd and tightened it. I took another sip of water. The ice had melted. It tasted warmer now. My phone buzzed again. Final confirmation. Freeze executed. That was all it said. Short, sharp, efficient. I slipped the phone back into my purse. Across the courtyard, Gregory's mother touched her son's arm. "What happened?" He did not answer. Victoria finally looked spooked. Her mouth parted slightly, her breath catching as though she sensed something was wrong for the first time all day. She whispered something to Gregory. He whispered something back. She stumbled a half step. Not much, but enough for anyone paying attention to see it. Guests began to murmur louder. Did something happen with the company? Why do they look like that? Is everything okay? No one knew, except me. A breeze swept through the courtyard, lifting the edge of my dress and carrying the faint scent of pine. Victoria clutched her bouquet tighter. Her knuckles whitened. Carter ended the conversation abruptly and walked toward the lodge entrance. Phone pressed to his ear again. Gregory followed him. His mother followed Gregory. Several cousins followed them. Victoria trailed behind late, still gripping her bouquet. The photographer shouted after them in frustration, but no one cared about pictures anymore. I finished my water and set the glass on a nearby table. My hand felt light. My heartbeat stayed quiet. Then I turned away and walked calmly toward the opposite side of the road, courtyard, where the sun hit the stone in warm golden patches. Behind me, the whispers grew louder. Something happened. Something big. Something with money. And then, faintly, someone said the phrase that floated through the air like a thread pulled. Loose. A large amount just got frozen. I kept walking. And I did not look back. I kept walking toward the outer edge of the courtyard until the voices behind me dissolved into a soft haze. The stone beneath my shoes held a little warmth from the afternoon sun, and for a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the crisp mountain air. The snow along the tree line glittered in the light, untouched and peaceful, completely separate from the chaos unraveling behind me. I did not turn around again. Not when I heard a raised voice. Not when someone called Victoria's name. Not when a bridesmaid gasped loud enough for the sound to echo across the garden. I walked toward the parking lot with slow, steady steps, unlocked my car, and sat inside for a moment, with my hands resting on the wheel. A small part of me wondered if someone would come after me, but no one did. Not my mom, not Victoria. Not a bridesmaid or a cousin, not even a staff member was sent to keep track of me. I was out of sight and therefore forgotten. That was the part that stung more than I cared to admit. I started the engine and began the long drive back to Denver. The mountains glowed pale gold as the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the highway. For a while, I kept replaying the look on Gregory's face, the way Victoria stumbled when she realized something had shifted beneath her feet. But eventually I turned the radio on and let a soft country song fill the silence. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had gone dark. I changed into pajamas, made a cup of tea, and curled up on the couch. I expected my phone to ring. I expected a text, something, anything. But there was nothing except one automated alert from the system confirming that the preliminary freeze was active. I set the phone down and let my head rest against the cushion. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. I closed them and drifted into sleep without meaning to. When morning came, I felt like I had slept under a weighted blanket. Heavy. Still, but clear enough to stand, shower, pull on a soft gray sweater, and head to work like any other Monday. Denver felt colder than Aspen. The air cut sharper, the traffic louder, the wind pushing against my face as I walked from the light rail station to the office building. The lobby buzzed with the usual chatter, people holding coffee cups and greeting each other with sleepy smiles. But when I stepped into my department, the energy shifted immediately. People huddled in little clusters near desks. Someone whispered near the printer. Another leaned close to his cubicle mate with wide eyes. I hung my coat on the back of my chair and sat down. Before I could even log into my computer, Mia popped her head over the dividing wall. Her eyes were big, the way they got when she had something she was dying to tell me. "Did you hear?" I blinked. "Hear what?" She lowered her voice. "That Aspen file you were working on? Something huge is happening." They flagged several inconsistencies in the tax documents. Some of the expense reports were duplicated and padded. And there are rumors someone tipped the system off about cross-checking deeper. My heartbeat gave a small jump, but my face remained still. "What kind of inconsistencies?" She shook her head. "No one knows the details yet, but it sounds serious. Everyone is talking about it." She paused, watching my reaction. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just tired." She gave me a small, sympathetic smile and disappeared back into her cubicle. I stared at my blank computer screen for a moment before finally typing in my login. Emails flooded in, meeting reminders, policy updates, and several subject lines related to the Aspen review. One caught my eye. Internal review notice. Aspen file pending full investigation. All staff with access to the file should prepare supplemental documentation. My fingers trembled for just a second as I clicked the message open. It was straightforward and clinical. Nothing pointed at me. Nothing asked for explanations. Just a request to compile every note, every comment, every supporting document related to the file. I exhaled slowly. All around me, the office hummed with tension. Pens tapped nervously. Phones buzzed. People whispered things they thought no one could hear. This is bad. They never activate that level of review unless they suspect intent. I heard the freeze hit some big accounts. I wonder who is behind all this. I opened the file directory and began organizing my notes. Every detail, every red flag, every irregularity. As I worked, flashes of the wedding drifted through my mind. The kitchen, the metal chair, the smell of garlic and onions. The sound of applause muffled the walls. The moment I walked out, the moment I made the call. It felt like a memory from someone else's life. Around midday, people began gathering near the break room, talking louder now. I overheard someone from compliance say that the case had escalated beyond preliminary review. They are calling in the state auditors. Someone from the fraud division is looping in too. This is going to get ugly. I heated my lunch and sat at a small table by the windows. Snow flurries drifted down slowly from the sky, making the city look softer than usual. Mia joined me with her salad. She poked at her lettuce, then leaned in. "So, get this. I heard the file is tied to someone pretty high up, like an executive, maybe even their family. You know how these things go. No one is saying names. But someone said the head of operations in Aspen might be involved." My chest tightened. Head of operations in Aspen. Carter Hayes. The same man who had taken that phone call at the wedding, his face turning to stone. The same man Gregory had stood beside, looking stricken. The same man whose voice had carried a quiet panic when he spoke again. I stirred my soup slowly. My mind replayed the way he had looked at his phone, then at his new son-in-law. I wondered if he had connected the dots yet, if he had realized that his company's file had been under review for weeks, if he had considered that someone close to the situation might have triggered something his team had hoped no one would ever notice. After lunch, the office grew quieter as people returned to their desks. I finished uploading my supplemental documents and sent them to the review team. A few minutes later, another email landed in my inbox. This one was flagged as urgent. Please provide all raw notes, timestamps, and cross-referencing logs related to the Aspen submission. State auditors will begin preliminary interviews tomorrow. I sat still for a moment. The words seemed to pulse on the screen. This had moved beyond anything I controlled. This was no longer a personal choice or a private action. It was now in the hands of state auditors, fraud investigators, compliance officers, and legal teams with authority far higher than mine. I closed the email and leaned back, staring at the soft glow of the ceiling lights overhead. A faint mix of emotions swirled inside me. Unease, relief, sadness, something like vindication, and something else I did not have a name for. It sat low in my chest, quiet and steady. Around 3 p.m, 2 co-workers walked past my desk talking in low voices. I heard Carter Hayes had to leave the wedding early because of it. His wife was embarrassed. He looked like he might faint. Whatever got frozen, it must have been huge. Huge. I looked down at my hands. They lay still on the desk, fingertips lightly touching. I powered through the rest of the afternoon, reviewing other files, answering messages, trying to blend back into the normal rhythm of the office. But beneath the surface, everything felt different. By the time I packed my things and headed toward the elevators, the hallways buzzed again with uncertainty. People speculate. People are guessing. People trying to predict what would happen when the auditors arrived. I walked out into the cold evening air, the same kind of air I had walked into the night I received the wedding invitation. But this time, something inside me felt steadier. At the light rail station, I stood on the platform and watched snow fall in thin flakes, drifting in the wind. A group of teenagers laughed nearby. A woman in a bright red coat scrolled through her phone. Someone hummed under their breath. I felt the faint vibration in my pocket. A new email. I opened it. Request for interview. Please confirm your availability for tomorrow afternoon. I read it twice. Then I closed my phone slowly and let out a long breath that fogged the air. In front of me, the train's headlights appeared down the track, glowing softly through the evening snow. As it approached, I stepped back slightly, letting a man in a business suit move past me. All at once, pieces clicked together in my mind. Victoria's obsession with the perfect image, my mom's constant pressure, the fear of being embarrassed in front of Gregory's family, the urgency to keep me quiet and hidden, the company file, the inconsistencies, the freeze, the panic, the phone call, Carter, Gregory, Victoria, all of it tied together in one tight knot that had just begun to unravel. I stepped onto the train and found an empty seat near the back. The doors closed. The train lurched forward. My reflection in the window looked calm, too calm for what was coming next. As the train rolled through the city, I rested my hands on my lap and watched the faint blur of lights streak across the glass. Tomorrow, everything will start breaking open. But not for me. For them. The days after the auditors contacted me passed more quietly than I expected. No sudden phone calls from my mom. No messages from Victoria. No relatives reached out to ask how the wedding had gone. It was as if everyone had decided at the same moment to push me out of their minds, to pretend that I had not even been at the ceremony. I went to work, answered questions from the review team, provided documents, and stayed focused. The world outside kept moving, but a strange stillness lived in my apartment every night when I came home, and set my bag on the kitchen table. A full week after the investigation began, I woke to the sound of urgent knocking at my door, the kind that carries panic, not politeness. My heart kicked hard once before I steadied myself and wrapped my sweater tighter around my shoulders. When I opened the door, Victoria stood there. Her hair was messy, pulled back in a loose bun that looked like she had given up halfway. Her makeup was streaked around her eyes, as if she had wiped tears and smeared mascara without realizing it. She was still wearing what looked like the same white coat she had worn at the wedding reception. Only now it hung crooked over her shoulders, the belt dragging on one side. She looked at me the way someone looks at a sudden gust of cold wind they were not prepared for. "Ellie," she whispered, her voice raw. "I need to talk to you." I stepped back and let her inside. She moved slowly, her heels tapping unsteadily against the wood floor. She sat at my kitchen table and rested both hands on its edge, as if she needed the stability just to sit upright. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. Everything has fallen apart. I stayed standing, leaning lightly against the counter. I waited for her to continue, giving her space to say what she needed to say. Her words tumbled out in pieces. The financial freeze had hit every account tied to Gregory and his family. His parents had been blindsided. They had assumed their son married into a respectable family, not one associated with a company under investigation. They questioned Carter. They questioned Gregory. And when Victoria walked into the conversation, they questioned her too. They think I knew something, she said, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. They think I lied to them. They think I married into their family to benefit from his company money. They think I planned something. I took a slow breath, letting her words settle. They sounded like pieces of a puzzle I had already seen forming the day of the wedding. She lifted her eyes to me. And now they are not talking to me. Gregory packed a bag and went to stay with his parents. He said he needs space. He said he cannot trust me. Then her voice broke completely. They froze everything. Our joint account, my personal account they helped set up, even the apartment deposit they paid for. She sat back in the chair, looking like someone who had fallen through thin ice. Then she narrowed her eyes, studying me with a mix of confusion and fear. Something happened at the wedding. Something started that day. And I cannot ignore the feeling that you know something I do not. I kept my expression calm. What did she expect me to say? That her cruelty had ricocheted back on her faster than she imagined. That while she hid me in a kitchen and laughed with our mom in the hallway, the truth had already been pulling at the threads she depended on. She leaned forward suddenly, anger flaring through her exhaustion. Why did you come to the wedding dressed like that? Why did you wander around? Why did you talk to anyone? I felt something in me go still, the same kind of stillness I felt in the kitchen that day, when humiliation settled into clarity. I answered quietly. I did not wander. I followed the instructions your planner gave me. I did not talk to anyone. I sat where they told me to sit. Victoria's face twisted. She knew exactly what I meant. That I had been sent to sit in a kitchen like I was an inconvenience, an eyesore, a burden. She tried to look away, but I continued gently. I was where you wanted me. Her shoulders slumped, and she covered her face with both hands. I could hear her struggling to breathe evenly, like she was fighting back another wave of tears. After a long silence, she lifted her head again. Tell me why. Tell me what happened. Tell me what you did. Her voice trembled between fear and accusation. I walked to my small desk in the corner and opened the drawer. Inside was a folder where I had saved screenshots. I had not intended to show them to her. Not at first. But now that she sat broken and desperate in my kitchen, asking for answers she had never cared about before, I realized the truth would cut deeper than anything I could say. I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward her. She opened it slowly, her fingers shaking. The first page held the screenshot the staff member had shown me, a message she had sent the planner that read in clear, unmistakable text that she wanted me hidden, that I would ruin her pictures, that I should eat in the back if I needed to eat at all. I watched her read it. Her mouth parted slightly, then trembled. She turned to the second page, a message from our mom telling the planner not to let me wander, that I should stay out of the way, that it would be better for everyone if I stayed behind the scenes until then. Reception was over. Her breath hitched. She blinked hard, as if trying to force the words to blur. She looked up at me, eyes wide and glistening. Ellie, I did not mean it like that. It was the wedding. It was stressful. People say things under pressure. You know how Mom gets. I held her gaze but did not speak. Her voice rose. This is not fair. Everything I worked for is falling apart. Gregory is gone. His family hates me. They think I lied or hid something. They think I am part of the fraud. She swallowed hard. I did not know about his company being under investigation. I swear I did not. Please believe that. I believed her, truly. Victoria was many things, but she was not strategic enough to hide a financial scandal. She had never cared enough about business or numbers to even understand them. But I also remembered the ceremony, The look on Carter's face, the look on Gregory's face, the whispers, the panic, the way Victoria continued smiling for pictures, too focused on herself to notice the collapse forming around her. She was not innocent, not in the way she thought she was. She had contributed something too, a lifetime of spite, cruelty, and humiliation poured onto the one person who had never fought back. She reached across the table suddenly, gripping the edge with white knuckles. "Ellie, why would you let this happen? Why would you destroy my life?" The words hit. The air like a spark, sharp and bright and wrong. I straightened, feeling something old and quiet rise inside me. I spoke softly, each word steady. "I did not destroy your life." She froze. I continued. "Your life fell apart because of lies inside your husband's company. Lies that has nothing to do with me." She shook her head rapidly, refusing the truth. I stepped closer, letting my words settle into the space between us. "And as for everything else, what you said about me, what Mom said, the way you wanted me hidden, that was your choice. You made those decisions. You sent those messages." She stared at the pages in front of her as if they were poisonous. I took a breath. "You asked why things happened the way they did. Why does your life feel like it is falling apart?" I waited until her eyes met. "Mine. You did this to yourself. All I did was stop hiding the truth." She sagged back into the chair, shoulders collapsing in on themselves. For the first time in my life, I saw her without the perfect hair, the perfect smile, the perfect armor she carried everywhere. She looked like a child who had finally been told no for the first time. After a long silence, she whispered, barely audible, "Did you hate me that much?" The question did not hurt the way I thought it would. I spoke gently. "I never hated you, not once. I just finally stopped letting you decide who I am." Her breath came out in a shaky exhale. She stared at the table, then at her hands, then at the folder again. When she finally looked up, there was nothing left in her expression except exhaustion. She tried asking one more time, "Tell me what I am supposed to do now." I shook my head softly. "I cannot answer that for you." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not fight them. She stood slowly, pulling her coat tighter around her. She walked to the door in small, uneven steps. Before leaving, she turned once more, hoping I might give her something. A promise, a reassurance, a lifeline. I gave her nothing. I simply opened the door. She walked out without another word. Her footsteps down the hallway grew softer until they disappeared completely. I closed the door gently. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight in my chest loosen, and the house was still. After Victoria left, that quiet wrapped around me in a way I had not felt before. It was not the heavy silence I used to carry home from family dinners, full of things unsaid and wounds ignored. This felt different, clean, honest. Almost like the air after a storm, when everything is clearer, even if the ground is still soaked. Days turned into weeks. My life settled into a new rhythm that was not loud or dramatic, but steady. I got up, made coffee, fed the cat, and went to work. The investigation into Aspen Mountain Pharmaceuticals moved forward in the morning. Background of everything, like a drumbeat I could not hear, but could feel through the floor. About a week after my conversation with Victoria, I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Harris, in a small office near Capitol Hill. She wore comfortable sweaters and kept a box of tissues on the table beside the chair where I sat. The first time I went, I told her I did not really know what I was supposed to say. She smiled gently and told me we could start with how it felt to be the invisible one in my own family. So I told her about diet plans at 10 years old and cheerleading jackets at 16 and graduation ceremonies where my achievement was background noise. I told her about the wedding invitation, the instructions to wear dark colors, the kitchen chair, and the screenshots from the planner. I told her about the call I made in the hallway and how it felt not vindictive, but necessary, like choosing oxygen over smoke. She listened, She nodded. Sometimes she asked gentle questions that made me pause and look at my own story from a different angle. Little by little, I began to understand that what happened at the wedding was not an isolated cruelty. It was the loudest chapter in a book that had been writing itself for decades. At work, things remained busy. The auditors came and went, meeting with staff, reviewing documents, asking calm, methodical questions. When it was my turn to be interviewed, I walked into a small conference room with 2 people from the state office. They asked how I had assessed the Aspen file, what I had noticed, what steps I had taken. I answered plainly. I did not embellish or hide anything. I explained that my job was to follow the evidence, and that the evidence in that file did not add up. They thanked me and told me that my notes had been thorough, that I had done what my position required. As I left the room, I realized my hands were not shaking. That in itself felt like a quiet victory. 6 weeks after the wedding, a thin layer of snow still clung to the shady parts of Denver, but the sidewalks had begun to clear. On a Friday afternoon, near the end of the workday, a new email appeared in my inbox. It was marked with a neutral subject line from the review system. Case summary available. Aspen Mountain Pharmaceuticals. Preliminary outcome. I sat for a moment before opening it. The office around me hummed with the usual end-of-week sounds. Printers, low conversations, someone laughing softly by the break room. I clicked on the message. The summary was brief and formal. It stated that the application from Aspen Mountain Pharmaceuticals had been denied. The project did not meet the criteria for public support. It mentioned irregularities in reported expenses, discrepancies in tax documentation, and patterns consistent with deliberate misrepresentation. It noted that the case had been referred to the appropriate authorities for any additional legal action the state might pursue. There was no mention of names beyond titles, no dramatic language, just clear, factual lines laid out in a calm tone. My eyes moved to the bottom of the summary, where a small box listed financial details. Total value temporarily frozen pending review, it read. I felt my breath catch as I read the figure beside it. $25 million. The number sat there on the screen, simple and unadorned. Not in headlines, not whispered in a courtyard, just printed in small black letters in a system summary. I let out a slow breath I had not realized I was holding. It was not a laugh. It was not a sob. It was something in between. A release. A letting go. It was never about the money for me. Not really. I did not care if their accounts were large or small. What mattered was that for once, the consequences of dishonesty had landed where they belonged, not on the people who had spent their lives trying to stay small and compliant. I closed my eyes for a moment, resting my fingertips lightly on the desk. When I opened them again, the office looked the same. My coworkers still walk past with files in hand. A phone rang in the next cubicle. Nothing dramatic had shifted in the visible world. Inside me, everything had. That night, back at my apartment, I lit a candle on the coffee table and curled up on the couch with a blanket. The city lights glowed through the window. My cat climbed into my lap and began to purr, the sound soft and steady. A message from my mom appeared on the screen. She wrote that things had been difficult for Victoria, that the Collins family had distanced themselves, that there was talk of lawyers and separation. She said she did not understand how everything had gone so wrong when all they ever wanted was a better life. She added one final line, asking if I had anything to do with the review. I stared at the words for a long moment. In the past, I would have rushed to smooth things over. I would have apologized just to keep the peace, even for things I had not done. I would have explained myself, trying to earn a softer tone from her. Instead, I set the phone down and let the message sit there unanswered. Not as revenge, not as punishment, simply as a boundary. I did not owe her an explanation for performing my job honestly. A few days later, my dad called. His voice was quieter than usual. He said that things at home were tense, that your mom is having a hard time, his words coming out stiff and unsure. He admitted that he did not know how to fix any of it. Then, after a pause, he told me that he was glad I had people at work who respected me, that he had always known I was good with details. It was the closest he had ever come to saying he was proud. I thanked him. We did not talk for long, but when I hung up, the ache associated with him felt a little less sharp. As for Victoria, I heard pieces of her situation through short updates. She moved into a small apartment closer to the city, one she could afford, without help from the Collins family. She took a job at a clinic doing administrative work. The glamorous social events disappeared from her social media. So did the posed photos with perfect angles. We did not become close. I did not suddenly become her confidant, but once or twice, she sent a simple message saying she was trying to figure out who she was without the constant need to impress people, that she was going to therapy too, that she was finally realizing how much of her identity had been built on how she looked beside other people. I wished her well. From a distance, I did not invite her back into the part of me that had spent so many years begging for scraps of approval. In my own life, things got quieter, then richer in small, ordinary ways. I started taking a yoga class on Saturday mornings. I tried new recipes on Sundays. Not to impress anyone, just because I enjoyed the way cooking calmed my mind. I went for walks around Washington Park and watched the geese on the lake, their slow, easy movement soothing something in me. Work did not become perfect, but my perception of it changed. I began to see clearly that my eye for detail, the skill my family once mocked as nitpicky, was a strength that protected people who had less power than the corporations. Asking for help. My reports meant something. My questions mattered. One afternoon, as I was leaving the building, Mia walked beside me, bundle in a thick coat. She nudged my shoulder and said that she had heard through the grapevine that the state reviewers had mentioned my name in a positive light, that they appreciated how carefully I had documented everything. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with revenge. It was the warmth of being seen accurately for the first time by people who mattered in a part of my life that felt solid. It was the opposite of standing behind a pillar or sitting alone in a kitchen. Sometimes, late at night, my mind still drifted back to the wedding, not to the humiliation, not to the kitchen chair, but to the hallway, where I stood with my phone in my hand the moment I decided to say the words to submit the case. I remembered how calm my voice sounded, how right it felt to let the system do what it was designed to do. What I had done was not dramatic. I had not hacked anything. I had not created lies. I had simply stopped participating in the silence that protected other people's deception. There is a kind of revenge that is petty and loud, full of shouting and broken plates. I used to think that was the only version that counted. Now I know better. Sometimes revenge is just refusing to lie for people who hurt you. Sometimes it is stepping out of the role they assigned you and letting them truth stand without your help hiding it. As I sat there on my couch, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside my window, I realized something important. I had not just watched my sister's world shake apart. I had built a new one for myself. One where my value was not measured by how I looked in photos or whether I fit into someone else's idea of perfection. One where my voice, used carefully, could change the outcome of things that were wrong. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this. Silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.